Have you ever stopped to think about how many tomatoes you can actually harvest from a single plant? 5 kilograms, maybe 7. But what if I told you that 76 kilograms from just 12 plants isn't some fantasy, but a real, achievable result using one simple, yet incredibly powerful method? Most gardeners make the same fundamental mistake. They let their tomatoes grow however they please, resulting in a disappointingly modest harvest. Today, I'm going to reveal all the secrets of single-stem tomato training. This is a technique that concentrates all the plant's vital energy into creating large, juicy, and abundant fruit. Watch this video until the end, and you'll get a step-by-step plan that will allow you to harvest tomatoes by the bucketful, even if you only have a small garden bed. Ready to be amazed? Let's get started. Before we dive into the specifics, let's understand why traditional approaches often fail to deliver the results we want. Most gardeners, both beginners and experienced veterans, face the same dilemma. How should I train my tomato plant? Some people don't touch their plants at all, and they quickly turn into bushy, sprawling jungles. Others try to find the middle ground by training them to 2 or 3 stems. The problem is that for a specific type of tomato, namely indeterminate or high-growing vining varieties, every extra stem is a direct competitor for nutrients. The plant, like any living organism, has limited resources. It is forced to distribute those resources among all its growing points. As a result, instead of several powerful trusses loaded with large fruit, we end up with a mess of weak branches carrying scrawny tomatoes. These dense plants also suffer from poor air circulation, making them easy targets for disease. The single-stem method isn't just about pruning. It's a conscious strategy of resource management designed to achieve one ultimate goal, the maximum possible yield. So, why the single stem? What is the fundamental principle at play here? It all comes down to concentration. Picture a factory that manufactures cars. If that factory starts spreading its resources thin, producing bicycles, scooters, and roller skates on the side, the quality of its main product will inevitably suffer. The same logic applies to the tomato plant. Its root system is the raw material supplier, bringing in nutrients and water. The leaves are the factories, generating energy through photosynthesis, and the fruit is the final product. When we leave only one main stem, we are essentially telling the plant, focus, all your energy, all your sap, and every nutrient must flow right here, onto this central conveyor belt. We remove all the side shoots or suckers, which are essentially just distractions. The plant no longer has to waste strength, growing unnecessary green bulk. All its power is directed toward forming flower trusses and sizing up the fruit. As a result, the fruit gets bigger, ripens faster and more uniformly, and their flavour becomes richer and sweeter. It's pure, straightforward biology, nothing more, nothing less. The crucial factor, the one that accounts for 90% of your success, is selecting the right varieties. Trying to grow a dwarf, determinate variety on a single leader is like entering a Shetland pony in the Kentucky Derby. You simply won't get the desired results. We need exclusively indeterminate or high-vigour tomato varieties. These are plants characterized by unlimited main stem growth. They are genetically programmed to continuously reach upwards, setting new flower trusses every 3 leaves throughout the entire growing season. This unique characteristic is precisely what allows us to build a high-yield, vertical production factory. Varieties such as Bull's Heart, De Barao, and many modern F1 hybrids are perfectly suited for this method. They possess immense yield potential, and our techniques are designed to fully unlock it. Before purchasing seeds, always read the packaging description carefully. If the label specifies that the variety is indeterminate or high vigour and requires staking and training, then you have found your ideal candidate. Choosing the wrong variety is the first and most fatal mistake you can make, one that will completely nullify all your subsequent efforts. The foundation for that bumper crop, that massive yield, starts right here, at the seedling stage. A weak, spindly, or overly leggy plant will never reach its full potential, no matter how much tender, loving care you shower on it later. Our goal is to have sturdy, stocky transplants ready for the garden featuring thick stems, deep green leaves, and a robust root system. What does it take to achieve this? First, light. Tomatoes are light hogs. They require a minimum of 12 to 14 hours of light daily. If natural light is scarce, supplemental grow lights are non-negotiable. Second, proper temperature management. Aim for about 22 to 24 degrees Celsius during the day, and, this is crucial, let the temperature drop a few degrees at night, settling around 18 degrees. This temperature fluctuation hardens the seedlings and is key to preventing them from getting too tall and leggy. And third, consistent, moderate watering and timely feeding. Don't drown your seedlings. Always allow the surface of the soil to dry out slightly between watering sessions. Your first feeding using a balanced fertilizer that emphasizes phosphorus and potassium should be done when the plants develop 2 or 3 true leaves. Strong seedlings are your initial capital, the crucial investment you make in your future harvest. Choosing and preparing the planting site is just as crucial as the quality of your seedlings. Tomatoes are true sun worshippers. They absolutely require the sunniest spot available, ideally one that receives at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight daily. Even minor shading will cause the plants to stretch and drastically reduce your harvest. The soil itself needs to be loose, fertile, and well aerated. The ideal approach is to prepare your beds in the fall, incorporating plenty of aged manure or compost. Then, in the spring, a simple addition of a balanced, complete fertilizer is usually sufficient. However, the most critical decision, especially when training tomatoes to a single stem, is your planting layout. Forget the idea of planting densely. These future giants need real room to grow. The optimal distance between plants in the row should be no less than 50 centimeters, but ideally 60 to 70 centimeters, 24 to 28 inches. And you should leave about a full meter, 3 feet, between the rows. Why all the space, you might wonder? This wide spacing ensures perfect airflow and ventilation, which is the single best defense against fungal diseases, especially the dreaded late blight. Additionally, every single plant receives maximum sun exposure and nutrition from the soil, directly translating into larger fruit size and overall higher yields. The crucial moment is finally here, transplanting your seedlings into the ground. There is one key horticultural technique that can significantly boost your plant strength: deep planting. Do not plant your tomato at the exact same level it was growing in the starter pot. Instead, dig a deeper hole or trench. You can either place the plant at a slight angle, or you can remove the bottom 2 leaves and plant the stem vertically, burying it deeper than usual. What's the secret? Any section of the buried stem will sprout new, supplementary roots along its entire length. This way, we artificially engineer a much more powerful and highly branched root system. The stronger the roots are, the more water and nutrients the plant can pull from the soil. Think of it as installing an extra pump for your tomato factory. This robust root system ensures the plant can support a massive harvest without experiencing stress or exhaustion. After planting, make sure to thoroughly soak the hole with warm water and then mulch the surrounding soil. This will help retain moisture and keep the weeds down. This simple foundational step will give you a tremendous advantage throughout the entire growing season. So, our seedlings have established themselves and are actively growing. Now comes the most crucial step: plant shaping and pruning. The first thing we absolutely must master is distinguishing the main stem from everything else. This is where beginner gardeners often run into confusion, which can unfortunately lead to removing the wrong growth. Let's settle this once and for all. Look at your main, central stalk. You'll notice large leaves extending from it on long stems, or petioles. Now pay close attention to the point where the leaf petiole meets the main stem. This little corner is called the leaf axil. It is precisely within this axil that the side shoot, what we call a sucker, begins to grow. Initially, it just looks like a tiny green sprout, but if left alone, it will very quickly develop into a full, competing second stem. Our mission is simple: identify and remove it. Crucially, do not mistake a sucker for a flower truss. The flower truss never grows out of the leaf axil. It emerges directly from the stem itself, usually higher up between the leaves. Remember this golden rule. Anything growing directly out of the leaf axil is a sucker, and it needs to be pinched off. Make sure to regularly inspect your plants so you don't miss the emergence of these competitors for your harvest. Now we come to the absolute most crucial ritual for growing single-stem tomatoes: suckering. This is the process of removing those pesky side shoots, which we call suckers. As we've discussed, every sucker is a potential second stem, and it will steal vital energy and nutrients meant for the fruits developing on the main vine. That's why suckering needs to become a regular habit for you, like brushing your teeth or doing your morning stretches. You should perform this procedure at least once a week, or even more often during periods of rapid growth. The biggest mistake people make is letting those suckers get too big. The larger the sucker gets, the more energy the plant has already wasted on its growth, and the bigger the wound you will leave when you remove it. The ideal size for removal is about 1 to 2 inches or 3 to 5 centimeters. At this stage, they are still soft and tender, and you can easily pinch them off without causing real damage to the main stem. Do not skip this step. Just 1 or 2 weeks without suckering, and your neat row of plants will turn into a tangled, overgrown mess that will be very difficult to correct. Consistency is the absolute key to success here. So, make a note in your calendar. Saturday morning, tour of the tomato patch and suckering duties. Now let's talk technique. How exactly should you remove these suckers? There are 2 main methods: pinching or snapping them off. I really do not recommend using scissors or pruners. First, there's a serious risk of transmitting diseases from one plant to another via contaminated tools. Secondly, cutting often leaves a smooth surface, and the sucker can easily regrow from that clean cut. The safest and best method is simply snapping the sucker off using your fingers. It's best done in the morning when the plants are saturated with moisture. At that time, the shoots are crisp and snap off very easily. Pinch the sucker right at the base between your thumb and index finger and gently rock it sideways. It should snap right off. Now here's a crucial point. Don't break it off completely, flush with the main stem. Experienced gardeners always leave a small stub, or heel, about 1/2 inch high. This stub dries out and essentially seals the wound, preventing another sucker from forming in that exact spot. It's a small trick that makes future maintenance much easier. If a sucker has unfortunately gotten too large and thick, the best approach is to carefully slice it off with a sharp, sanitized knife, again making sure to leave that small stub. But try your best not to let them get that big. Beyond managing suckers, we eventually have to address another important question. What should we do about the lower leaves? Should we remove them? The answer is unequivocally yes, but this process needs to be done gradually and thoughtfully. Leaves are the plant's photosynthetic engine, its food source, and without them, the plant can't feed itself. However, as the plant grows taller, those lower leaves become heavily shaded, receive very little light, and essentially stop contributing to the harvest. What they continue to do, is actively transpire moisture, and more dangerously, because they often touch the soil, they become easy entry points for various fungal infections, primarily late blight and leaf mould. Therefore, a good rule of thumb is this: once the fruit on the very first truss reaches the size of a walnut, you can safely remove all leaves located below that cluster. A word of warning: never remove all the target leaves at once. That would put the plant under severe stress. Instead, take off just 2 or 3 leaves every few days. You should remove them the same way you remove suckers, by snapping the leaf stem or petiole upward so it detaches cleanly from the main stalk. This procedure not only drastically improves air circulation around the base of the plant, but also redirects all the plant's energy and nutrients directly toward the developing fruit, speeding up ripening and fruit fill. When growing tomatoes on a single stem, the plant gets tall but remains relatively thin and fragile. It simply won't be strong enough to bear the weight of the entire harvest. That's why sturdy support and proper tying are absolutely essential. Without staking, the stem will inevitably snap under the weight of the fruit. There are several effective ways to provide support. The simplest method is using an individual stake or support, at least 6 feet tall, placed right next to each plant. As the plant grows, gently tie the stem to the support using soft materials such as gardening twine, specialized clips, or fabric strips. Crucially, never use wire or fishing line, as these can easily cut right through the stem. Always make sure the ties are loose enough to form a generous loop, preventing them from constricting the stem as it thickens. For greenhouses, the trellis method is extremely convenient. A strong wire is stretched horizontally above the tomato rows, and then a vertical piece of twine is dropped from the wire down to the base of each individual plant. As the stem grows, you simply wrap it around this vertical twine. This is very efficient and saves a lot of space. Whatever system you choose, remember this: staking must be done regularly. Never let the top of the plant droop or hang over. The watering strategy for our high-yield tomato plants differs significantly from the care routine for standard bushes. We follow the less often but intensely rule. Frequent, shallow watering encourages the roots to stay near the surface, making them lazy and highly susceptible to drought. Our main goal is to force those roots to grow deep in search of moisture. This means we must water thoroughly, but sparingly. On average, once or twice a week is usually sufficient, though this always depends on the weather and your specific soil type. The key indicator is the soil condition itself. The top few inches must be allowed to dry completely between watering sessions. Always water strictly at the base, taking great care not to wet the leaves or the main stem. Moisture on the foliage, especially later in the day, is a recipe for fungal diseases. The ideal time to water is in the morning or early afternoon. The water should be warm, ideally left to sit out in the sun beforehand. Cold water straight from a well or hose is a stress factor for the roots. For a single mature plant, you should be using at least 5, sometimes even 10 litres of water to thoroughly saturate the soil deep down. Following this correct watering method is the foundation for a harvest that is not only large but also flavourful and firm, not watery. To achieve such a huge yield, the plant requires intensive feeding. We can generally divide the fertilisation schedule into 2 distinct phases. The first phase covers the period from transplanting the seedlings up to the moment they start flowering and setting those initial fruits. During this stage, the plant primarily needs building materials to grow a robust stem and healthy foliage. The key element during this phase is nitrogen. However, moderation is crucial. Too much nitrogen will lead to what growers call going leafy, where the plant focuses entirely on producing lush foliage at the expense of setting blooms. For this reason, it's best to use balanced, complete fertilizers where nitrogen is present but not the dominant nutrient. Excellent organic options include liquid feeds made from composted cow manure, chicken litter, or a fermented green fertilizer tea. If you prefer mineral feeds, you can use ammonium nitrate or urea, but only in extremely moderate doses. 1 or 2 applications of these nutrients, spaced 10 to 14 days apart, will be sufficient to give the plant a strong start and prepare it for its main task, fruit production. Always monitor the plant's appearance. If the foliage is dark green and robust, you know they are receiving adequate nutrients. The second, and arguably the most crucial phase of fertilization, begins the moment your tomatoes start setting and sizing up fruit. From this point on, we drastically reduce or eliminate nitrogen from the feeding schedule and shift our focus entirely to the other 2 primary macronutrients, phosphorus and potassium. Phosphorus supports robust root development and helps initiate new flower trusses, but potassium is the superstar here. It is the key element responsible for fruit size, weight, flavour, and overall sweetness, or Brix levels. A potassium deficiency results in uneven ripening, often characterised by those hard green shoulders near the stem end, and the fruit will inevitably taste acidic rather than sweet. So, what should you feed them? The ideal choice is monopotassium phosphate, or MKP. This is a highly soluble fertiliser that provides both phosphorus and potassium in a form the plant can immediately use. Alternatively, you can opt for potassium sulfate or even basic wood ash, which is a fantastic organic source of potassium and various micronutrients. These potassium feeds should be applied regularly, about every 10 to 14 days, and continued throughout the entire productive fruiting season. It's this dedicated regimen that allows the tomato plant to fully realise its potential, maximising yields and growing every single set fruit to an impressive, respectable size. While nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium are crucial, tomatoes actually need a full spectrum of micronutrients for healthy growth and abundant yields. Although only tiny amounts are required, a deficiency in these elements can lead to serious problems. One of the most critical micronutrients is boron. It's essential for pollen germination and consequently for flower fertilization. If there's a boron shortage, the flowers may simply drop off without setting fruit. That's why a foliar feeding, spraying the leaves with a boric acid solution is extremely beneficial during the heavy blooming period. Another critically important element is calcium. A lack of calcium, especially in hot weather, leads to an unpleasant physiological disorder called blossom end rot. This is that black, dry spot that appears on the tip of the fruit. For prevention, you can use calcium nitrate feedings. Tomatoes also require magnesium, iron, zinc, and other trace elements. The simplest way to ensure your plants get everything they need is by using high-quality complete fertilizers that already contain all the necessary micronutrients in a chelated form, which means they are highly accessible and easily absorbed by the plants. Indeterminate tomatoes, as you know, have virtually unlimited growth. Given ideal conditions, they'll just keep climbing until the first heavy frost finally puts an end to their season. But we certainly don't need a 10-foot tall vine in September with fruit that will never manage to ripen. Our goal is to stop that upward growth promptly, forcing the plant to redirect all its energy and nutrients into maturing the fruit it has already set. This crucial procedure is known as topping or pinching out the growing tip. Gardeners typically perform this task in late July or early August, depending heavily on their specific climate zone. The technique is straightforward. Locate the highest growing point of the main stem and simply pinch it off. Ideally, you top the plant 2 leaf clusters above the final fruit truss that you estimate will have time to ripen before the cold sets in. Essentially, we are leaving only the amount of fruit on the vine that we calculate can fully mature before the season ends. Once the tip is removed, the plant receives a powerful signal. Vertical growth is done. Time to focus on reproduction. All those valuable carbohydrates and nutrients immediately rush into the existing fruit, significantly accelerating their sizing up and ripening. This technique is essential for ensuring a full, robust harvest, especially for gardeners in regions with short growing seasons. One of the main benefits of single-stem training is a significant reduction in the risk of disease. Why is that? The answer is actually very straightforward. By consistently removing unnecessary suckers and all the lower leaves, we essentially create an ideal microclimate throughout the entire growing area. The plants aren't crowded. They receive fantastic airflow and ventilation from all sides, and sunlight easily penetrates down to the main stem and the soil below. In these improved conditions, moisture simply doesn't linger on the foliage after rain or watering. This rapid drying is deadly for the spores of common fungal diseases like late blight, leaf mould, and grey mould. The pathogens that cause these illnesses need 2 things to germinate and spread: standing water droplets and stagnant, humid air. But through careful pruning and training, we effectively strip away those comfortable, hospitable conditions. Of course, this method doesn't offer a 100% guarantee, especially during cold or excessively rainy summers. However, it is an extremely powerful preventative measure. It allows you to significantly cut down on the number of required fungicide sprays, or perhaps avoid chemical treatments entirely, especially if you incorporate biological controls like Bacillus subtilis or Trichoderma for added protection. Even in perfectly ventilated tomato patches, our plants can still fall victim to pests. The most common culprits are aphids, whiteflies and spider mites. A proactive approach is always far more effective than trying to fight a full-blown infestation later. What does this mean in practice? Regular inspection. Make it a habit to check the underside of your tomato leaves at least every few days. This is where pests usually congregate and start settling in. If you spot the first few scouts, don't immediately reach for chemical insecticides. Biological controls or simple home remedies work wonders when the problem is minor. For instance, a solution of horticultural or mild dish soap works great for washing off aphids. Against whiteflies, especially in a greenhouse environment, hanging yellow sticky traps is a very useful technique. Spider mites hate high humidity. Sometimes, simply misting your plants with plain water, focusing specifically on the undersides of the leaves, is enough to deter them. The key is never to let the problem escalate. The sooner you find these pests, the easier and safer it will be to deal with them without compromising your harvest. Always remember that a healthy, strong plant, one that receives adequate nutrients and water, is inherently much more resistant to pest attacks in the first place. And finally, the best moment arrives, the harvest. But even harvesting has its tricks. How do you know when a tomato is perfectly ripe and truly bursting with flavour? Simply relying on colour isn't always enough. The main indicator is the specific colour for that variety. If the tomato variety is supposed to be bright red, wait for a deep, uniform colour. If the fruit is pink, it should turn a deep rose colour. But there's also the touch test. A ripe tomato should feel slightly springy when gently pressed. It shouldn't be rock hard, but it shouldn't be mushy either. For better storage, it's best to pick the fruit while leaving the stem and calyx attached. Don't pull the fruit. Instead, carefully snap it off at the joint of the stem, or simply snip it with scissors. Regular harvesting isn't just a rewarding activity, it's also a key agricultural technique. By removing ripened fruit, we signal the plant to redirect its energy toward filling out and maturing the next clusters. Don't wait for all the tomatoes on a single vine or cluster to ripen at the same time. Pick them as they are ready. Doing this dramatically speeds up the ripening of the remaining fruit. During peak season, harvesting every 2 to 3 days is standard practice to maximize your overall yield. Let's quickly review the most common mistakes that can completely sabotage all your hard work. Mistake number 1, choosing the wrong variety. Trying to train a determinate variety to a single stem is a complete waste of effort. Mistake number 2, greed. Leaving 1 or 2 lower suckers, just in case, completely violates the entire principle of the method and wastes the plant's valuable energy. We remove absolutely all of them, no exceptions. Mistake number 3, inconsistency. Missing a week of pinching will result in an overgrown jungle that will be incredibly difficult to manage later on. Mistake number 4, improper staking. Using thin string or tight loops that cut right into the stem can easily kill the plant. Always use only soft materials and loose ties. And finally, mistake number 5, nutritional imbalance. Too much nitrogen late in the season will lead to lush foliage instead of fruit production, and a potassium deficiency will make your harvest small and acidic. Avoid these 5 common blunders and your path to a record harvest will be much shorter and simpler. So now that we've gone through the entire process, from seed to ripe fruit, let's circle back to the figures we began with. 76 kilograms harvested from just 12 plants. Let's do the math. That works out to an average of over 6.3 kilograms per single plant. Is that even possible? Absolutely it is. When training a tomato plant to a single stem, depending on the specific variety and the length of your season, we can typically harvest between 8 and 12, sometimes even more, full fruit trusses. If each truss yields an average of at least 500 to 600 grams of fruit, the final output easily reaches that coveted 6 to 7 kilograms per plant. Every single step we've discussed, from variety selection and seedling preparation, to proper pruning, suckering, optimal watering, fertilization, and eventually topping the plant, contributes directly to this final figure. This isn't a miracle or some kind of magic. It's a systemic approach coupled with a deep understanding of the plant's requirements. It is a dedicated technology designed to unlock the full genetic potential that breeders have engineered into today's high-yielding tomato varieties. Alright, let's wrap things up. As you can see, harvesting dozens of kilograms of premium tomatoes from just a few plants isn't some gardening legend. It's a perfectly achievable reality. The main secret isn't hidden in magic fertilizers, but in smart plant management. Training your plants to a single stem is the absolute key to this system. Choose the right indeterminate varieties, provide them with optimal growing conditions, be diligent with pruning, never skip staking, feed and water them precisely, and the results will absolutely blow you away. This method essentially turns every single tomato plant you have into a highly efficient vertical factory, producing the most delicious fruit. Yes, it requires consistent attention and regularity. But trust me, when you start collecting your harvest by the bucketful, all that effort will pay off tenfold. Thank you for sticking with this video until the very end. I truly hope these tips help you smash all your personal records next season. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if you found this video helpful. Now I have a question for you. What is your personal record harvest for tomatoes? And what training method do you use? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to read about it.